Coming up on Locked On Dodgers, the Dodgers did make several trades on Tuesday at the trade deadline. Unfortunately, none of them were major, and it was more of a deadline. We will talk about the two big name pitchers that the Dodgers missed out on for two different reasons, neither of which are really their fault, but they still missed out on them. So we'll talk about that. We will analyze and evaluate the overall trade deadline as a whole. And then, there was a baseball game tonight too, and the Dodgers won, and some of their newly added acquisitions contributed pretty well in that game. So lots to talk about. So let's get Locked On Dodgers.
You are Locked On Dodgers, your daily Los Angeles Dodgers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, Dodger fans, this is Locked On Dodgers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen every weekday morning. Remember, this show is free and available on all podcast platforms and on YouTube simply by searching for Locked On Dodgers. Or even better, go ahead and subscribe wherever you're watching or listening right now. Then you can be an everydayer just like we are. If this is your first time with us, I am Jeff Snider. That guy next to me is Vince Samperio. Vince and I are both lifelong Dodger fans just like you are. We also bring you the... Man, I don't remember how to talk anymore. This trade deadline wore me out. Look, we're big Dodger fans, we're smart fans, blah, blah, blah. We're glad you're here. Let's talk about the Dodgers. Trade deadline was, first, let's talk about Sleeper. This episode is brought to you by Sleeper. Swing for the fences on Sleeper picks, and you could win up to 100 times your money. Download the Sleeper app and use promo code Locked On, and you'll get up to $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. Currently operational in over 30 states. Check out Sleeper today. Now, the trade deadline came and went, Vince. Yesterday on our mailbag, somebody asked if we thought the Dodgers would make two or more trades, and we said we did expect at least two trades, and we were right. The Dodgers made either three or four trades on Tuesday. Unfortunately, all of them were three guys who had been DFA'd and one guy who was DFA'd earlier this season. All of them traded for cash considerations. And so, they looked more like sellers today than buyers. Not all their fault, though, because the Dodgers tried to buy. Their two top-level pitchers got traded on Tuesday. Justin Verlander got traded by the Mets to the Astros, and two guys almost got traded. Verlander did get traded, and the Tigers agreed to trade Eduardo Rodriguez to the Dodgers, and then he invoked his no-trade clause. So in the end, you had Verlander, who had a no-trade clause and wanted to go back to the Astros. So he used his no-trade clause to get sent back to the team he wanted to go to. And Eduardo Rodriguez used his no-trade clause to stay in Detroit, which I can't imagine using any contract clause to stay in Detroit. But you know what? He wanted to be on the East Coast from what we've heard, or closer to the East Coast, a little bit closer to Florida. Maybe it has more to do with time zones as far as his family watching on TV from Florida. Maybe that's something that I think maybe people underestimate. When you're playing on the West Coast and your family lives on the East Coast, they don't get to watch you play very often. So, whatever the reasons, Eduardo Rodriguez chose to nix the trade. And so the Dodgers ended up getting nobody. And Andrew Friedman said, basically, the way they had set up earlier, leading up to the trade deadline, making moves around the margins that we've talked about, and we'll talk more about those in the second segment today, that allowed them to focus on the high-end stuff, and they fully expected to get a deal done for Verlander or Rodriguez or maybe Dylan Cease or maybe Mitch Keller. In the end, Verlander was the only one of those that got moved, and he wanted to go to the Astros, and the Dodgers are left out in the cold.
Yeah, it was... we're going to preface everything by saying that the trade deadline was a disappointment because the Dodgers didn't get what they needed in terms of a big name starting pitcher. But again, it's not entirely there. Now, you can believe it's, Andrew Friedman's fault that he was negotiating the Rodriguez trade, knowing that he had a no trade clause and there was no, he said that they were they didn't believe, they were under the impression that he was not going to do, reject the trade, basically. And with Verlander, it was more of him wanting to be in Houston more, so he might have been using that in the Mets towards the Mets of, I'm only going to waive this if it's to Houston. I don't know if that's entirely what he said, but at least that's kind of the gist of he wanted to be there more. Because if it all came down to, if there was no trade clauses, I think the Dodgers would for sure have one of these two, because they would have been able to offer a better package than the Astros did to the Mets. And they obviously had the deal in place already with the Tigers, so they had the right package to send over there. So it's hard to be 100% upset because, like I said, they had the agreement for one pitcher and he said no, and they would have had a better deal for the other pitcher, but he wanted to go back to Houston. Now you can quibble with them not, stepping up for Mitch Keller or Dylan Cease, or believing that they spend a lot, most of their time on the Rodriguez thing. If that's I saw a lot of people speaking in absolutes, saying they were wasting their time with that, when we don't really know how much time the Dodgers spent making that deal or anything of that nature. So there's no way we can speak in absolutes.
Yeah.
What we do know is that they tried, they had the agreement, didn't work out. And when it comes to like Keller and Cease, it's one of those where we don't know what they were asking for. All the reports were just that they were asking for a lot. And at some point, you can't just pay the price just because you're fans or you want to pay the price. You have to be cognizant of the situation. And I think that's what ended up happening with the Dodgers.
Yeah, and it's entirely possible and probably even likely that the Pirates and White Sox were like, any deal starts with Bobby Miller, or maybe even Bobby Miller and Diego Cartaya. And, the Dodgers aren't going to make a trade like that when Bobby Miller is currently a big part of their current rotation. And so, yeah, Dylan Cease is better right now than Bobby Miller, but not enough better to make it worth giving him and other prospects up to, when it's not actually adding to the rotation. It's just replacing guys in the rotation. So, and like you said, we don't know who they asked for, but that's a really easy example of something that it would have been the correct move for Friedman to say, all right, well, if that's your starting point, a deal's not going to be made here.
Yeah. And again, I was to the point where basically everyone but Bobby Miller was untouchable for a guy like Dylan Cease. Keller, maybe not as much there. There might have been a couple more guys I would not have wanted to trade for Keller, but like for Cease, even if Cartaya had been part of it, I think with Will Smith and rushing and, a few years down the line, Jesus Galiz, like they would have been fine. But it's a matter of we don't know. And it's hard for us to be out here speaking in absolutes when we really don't know what it was going to cost for them. So,
yeah. And the fact is, if we look at the guys who did get traded at this trade deadline, moving past the guys who didn't, we know why Rodriguez didn't. We don't know why Keller and Cease didn't. But the guys who did get traded, Verlander is really the only one who got traded who I wish was on the Dodgers right now. Scherzer got traded, and Scherzer would definitely be an upgrade, but Scherzer's had a rough year. And even when Scherzer was great, we saw that he didn't lead the Dodgers to a World Series title, and we'll probably talk more about that concept in the next segment. We're kind of evaluating the trade deadline overall. But Jack Flaherty went to the Orioles. I didn't want him. Jordan Montgomery went to, where did he go? Rangers. And Montgomery would have been fine, but he's not a game changer. After they got Lance Lynn, the Dodgers needed somebody who would actually move the needle. If they were going to make a trade, it needed to be a guy who's going to make an impact in the postseason. And Verlander, I think, is the only guy who got traded, only pitcher who got traded, who you can say that he's an impact player in the postseason. And even him, he's 1-7 in his career in the World Series. And doesn't mean he hasn't pitched well. He lost to the Dodgers in 2017 in the World Series, should have had 2 losses in that series. But he pitched really well in those games. So Verlander is a very good pitcher, even when he struggles in the postseason, or at least doesn't get wins. So I would have loved to get Verlander, but he wanted to go to Houston. And so, I guess that's a thing people want to do. I can't imagine looking at the calendar and saying, hey, it's August. I want to go to Houston. That sounds fun. Let's go to Houston in August. Yeah, whatever.
Houston in general is just, I've been there a couple times.
I actually like it in the spring. It's pretty if you go to the right parts. But
real quick, just they could have had Flaherty, they could have had Giolito, they could have had Lorenzen, they could have had all these guys that got traded that you mentioned. But you're upgrading for the rest of the regular season, and you're not necessarily getting somebody that's, going to guarantee you anything in the postseason, which is what fans like to speak about in the absolutes of, oh, he's going to help. We don't know. Ryan Yarbrough, who they did trade for, who I haven't mentioned yet, could be a guy that pitches 6 innings in the postseason like Tyler Anderson did last year, and we don't know.
Yeah. We'll come back in a second. We will kind of evaluate the trade deadline overall, talk more about Yarbrough and the trades that they did make earlier leading up to the deadline. So thanks for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen, and please keep it Locked On Dodgers. This episode is brought to you by Sleeper. You want the chance to win more money with less picks? Head to Sleeper, where you can win up to 100 times your money on just 2 or more fantasy baseball picks. Look, the Dodgers tonight face a pitcher by the name of Hogan Harris, who may be a Dr. Seuss character, may be a pitcher for the A's. Either way, he throws with his left hand, and I think Mookie Betts is probably going to hit a home run against him. You think Mookie Betts is going to homer off Hogan Harris? Well, go to Sleeper, and you can swing for the fences with up to 100 times payouts. All you have to do is choose 2 or more players that you like and select more or less on their stat categories like home runs, strikeouts, hits, and more. Get your picks right, and you could win big. If you look at the screenshots on the screen, if you're watching on YouTube, it's a really easy interface to use. Great fantasy sports thing that really plays on your knowledge of baseball, and you can put that knowledge to work and actually get pretty good payouts playing this fantasy baseball game. So if you use promo code Locked On, you'll get up to $100 match on your first deposit. Terms and conditions apply. See Sleeper's terms of use for details. Currently operational in over 30 states. Check out Sleeper today. All right, we are back. We want to thank you for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen every weekday morning. If you're watching this on YouTube, we'd love to hear from you in the YouTube comment section. If you're listening on the podcast, we'd love to hear from you through email or social media or whatever. We'll give you all that contact info at the end. Want to remind you, if you can't catch tonight's Dodger game on TV, if you can't see Mookie Betts homer off Hogan Harris, you can at least hear it on the radio on Sirius XM or the SXM app. Just launch the app and search for Dodgers. You can also listen to this podcast on the SXM app by searching for Locked On Dodgers. Trade deadline is done. The Dodgers, we talked a little bit about this yesterday, Vince, but I think it bears repeating that if it wasn't for the expectations, the Dodgers addressed all of their needs. The Dodgers went into this trade deadline definitely needing starting pitching, especially somebody who could go deep in games to help their bullpen not get worn out. They needed a little bit of bullpen help, and they needed help against left-handed pitching. And the 4 trades they made before Tuesday, Lance Lynn, who we'll talk about in the third segment because he made his Dodgers debut on Tuesday night and looked really good for the most part. They got him. He is definitely going to provide innings. We saw it on Tuesday. He went 7 innings. That's kind of what you expect from him. 6 or 7 innings, 3 or 4 runs. And he's not going to be a world beater, but that is hugely valuable on a team like the Dodgers. They got Joe Kelly for help in the bullpen, and they got Kike Hernandez and Ahmed Rosario to help with batting against left-handed pitching. And then on Tuesday, they got rid of some dead weight guys who had already been DFA, Justin Verlander, Phil Bickford, somebody else. Eddie Leonard. And then Adam Kolarek, who had been DFA'd earlier and outrated to AAA, traded all those guys for cash considerations, but brought in Ryan Yarbrough from the Royals, gave up maybe a little bit more than you might have thought. They gave up Devin Mann and another younger guy who's, I can't remember his name. Derlin Figueroa. And that's funny. I remember the first name. You remember the last name. So that's why we have 2 hosts here, folks, so that we can eventually remember a guy's name. But Ryan Yarbrough is an interesting trade. We'll see. The Dodgers must see something in him. He has been decent this year, but his best games have come against the worst division in baseball. He's been pretty bad against teams that aren't in the AL Central. But, the Dodgers probably see something in him, including maybe eating innings. And maybe that's valuable enough. Maybe, we talked last week about who's going to lose their rotation spot. And you can make a case for a few of the rookies to lose a rotation spot. And so maybe they're planning on giving both of those rookies a break just for innings reasons or whatever. But yeah, overall, Vince, other than the disappointment of not getting a big name pitcher, at least for the regular season, I feel like the Dodgers did a pretty good job addressing their immediate needs.
Yeah, like we talked about, they made the moves around the margins. They made the team better. Now they made the team better more so on the projections of what we think and what they think, more so than the actual production so far. But again, it's also all relative. Like Ahmed Rosario and Kike Hernandez were some of the worst hitters in baseball this year, or worst hitters and defenders. But the Dodgers aren't going to hit them a lot against right-handed pitching, which is where they can't hit. And Ahmed Rosario is not going to play a lot of shortstop, where he played. And Kike Hernandez is not also going to play a lot of shortstop, which is where he had struggles playing. So, that there. Lance Lynn, hasn't been good in terms of ERA and giving up homers, which he had issues. Giving up homers was his issue in his debut with the Dodgers. But he can give the Dodgers length, which is what they need because their bullpen is throwing 5-6 innings just about every game some days or some weeks. And, with Yarbrough, same thing. He's gone 7 innings, 6 innings, 5 and I think 2/3 his last 3 starts. Yes, they were all against the AL Central. Caveat, Eduardo Rodriguez is a much better pitcher than Ryan Yarbrough, but Eduardo Rodriguez also has big splits between pitching against the AL Central and pitching it against the rest of the league. So, yes, you're going to be better against worse teams. And as we saw with Lance Lynn on Tuesday against the A's, like the Dodgers are going to play some bad teams the rest of the way. They still need to get through the regular season. This may not be a move. I don't know if Ryan Yarbrough is going to get a start in a playoff series, but he's going to have a few starts against bad teams and a few starts against good teams the rest of the way. And as long as those starts against the bad teams are pretty solid and the starts against the good teams are halfway decent, then that's an upgrade for what they had before with what you don't know with Michael Grove and Emmett Sheehan. We don't know how he's going to fare with extra innings added on as the season continues to go on. So, yeah, they make the upgrades small here and there, but it at the end of the day, the team got better from where they were before. And now you take a little bit less of the burden off some of these young pitchers. And you're also banking on some positive things to happen, which is Julio bouncing back and Clayton Kershaw coming back and staying healthy the entire season. Now, last year, we know that they banked on some of that things happening in terms of health and in terms of bounce back. It didn't quite work out the way they wanted. But again, you're in a spot where you're in first place. You made your team better. You had a deal in place for one of the top pitchers that was available, and it just didn't work out.
Yeah. And like you said, the Dodgers got better. And it's important to note that they got better. And at the start, before they got better, they were in first place. Like the Dodgers, these moves will help them hopefully win their division and make the postseason. And then once you're in the postseason, if there's one thing we know as Dodger fans, it's that making a big splashy trade deadline move doesn't guarantee you postseason success. Yu Darvish in 2017 didn't guarantee postseason success. He helped them get to the postseason and, and pitched okay sometimes in the postseason, but, also struggled really badly. And, there may have been underlying reasons for that. 2018, Manny Machado, Dodgers probably don't get to the postseason without him, but he struck out to end the World Series that the Dodgers lost. 2021, Max Scherzer and Trey Turner didn't help them do anything. There's not a guarantee that making a huge splash at the trade deadline. If you look at, in 2021, it was Eddie freaking Rosario was the big Dodger killer for the Braves. Eddie Rosario was not a move at the trade deadline that people thought was a game changer. And yet the Braves got Eddie Rosario at the trade deadline. They got Eddie Rosario and Jock Peterson and Adam Duvall, I think, all at the trade deadline. And they ended up all contributing hugely in the postseason. In 2019, it was Howie Kendrick for the Nationals. Hadn't been a trade deadline thing, but it wasn't the big, and obviously Juan Soto and Anthony Rendon both had the home runs against Kershaw in the NLDS that we don't want to talk about. But Howie Kendrick hit the game-winning homer in that game, and Howie Kendrick had a huge homer in the World Series. When 2018, it was Steve freaking Pierce for the Red Sox. Like you had never heard of Steve Pierce before that year, and you haven't thought about him since then. But I think he was the World Series MVP. And so you don't need to, and obviously you want the best team possible, but the Dodgers have Mookie Betts and Freddie Freeman and Will Smith and JD Martinez. They have big stars. And on the pitching side, they have potential to have stars, but not doing something huge at the trade deadline doesn't mean they can't have success in the postseason, because the postseason is all about getting there and then not going 0 for 20 with runners in scoring position and getting those big hits. In 2020, the Dodgers got the big hits. Remember, they were scoring with 2 outs constantly that postseason, just huge hits. Corey Seager, different guys getting huge hits. But, two of the biggest hits in that NLCS came from Kike Hernandez and Cody Bellinger, both of whom had struggled pretty bad during the season. And so it's all about the right guys stepping up at the right time. And the most important factor is getting to the postseason, having that opportunity for the guys to step up. And the fact is, this trade deadline definitely improved the Dodgers' chances of getting to the postseason, even if they didn't improve those chances as much as getting Justin Verlander would have.
Yeah, it's always funny to me how, like, if Dodger fans are disappointed at this deadline because the Dodgers don't have the pitching to win in October, don't have whatever. And also, when the Dodgers do have the best team on paper or do have go into the postseason with the best roster and then lose, it's like, oh, blah, blah, they need to struggle.
They weren't built for October.
Yeah, like you can't have it both ways. It's one or the other. There's no, rhyme or reason. The Dodgers, 2017 is always going to suck because the Dodgers should have 2 World Series in this stretch that they've had the last, 10 years, making playoffs every year. That changes the dynamic of it a little bit, I think, and kind of would help out. But regardless of that, like, we don't know. The Dodgers have lost to teams that are way worse. That 2019 year, the Nationals had the worst bullpen in baseball, and then they had a bullpen that ended up doing the job in October when it mattered. Like, we don't know what's going to happen, and you just need to get in, and you get in, and that's all you can ask for.
Yep. And I just to be clear, we are coping here a little bit. Neither of us is happy that the Dodgers didn't get Justin Verlander or happy that they didn't get Dylan Cease. We would have loved for that to happen. We're just kind of pointing out that it doesn't mean that things are hopeless. It doesn't mean that the Dodgers have no chance of winning the World Series. They still have a pretty darn good chance because they still have a pretty darn good team, and they have a good chance of getting to the postseason, and that's the first step. We're going to come back in a second. The Dodgers actually played a baseball game after the trade deadline was done against the A's. They won the game. Lance Lynn, Kike Hernandez, and a few other guys who've been around a little bit longer than them contributed pretty well. We're going to talk all about that, so please keep it locked on Dodgers. We are back. We want to thank you again for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen every weekday morning. Want to remind you can always catch the Dodgers radio broadcast. If you can't catch the game on TV, you can catch the radio broadcast on SiriusXM or the SXM app just by searching for Dodgers, and you can catch this podcast on the app by searching for Locked On Dodgers. We want to thank all of our everydayers for being with us every day. If you're not an everydayer, it's super fun to be an everydayer. You get to listen to us every day or watch us. So just be with us, and you don't have to be every day. Just do your best, but we try to put out some good content for you every weekday morning. Our goal is about a half hour so that you can listen to it on your commute to work or while you're getting ready in the morning or whatever. And so we're here every day, and you might as well be too. The Dodgers played on Tuesday night. Lance Lynn made his Dodgers debut. He went 7 innings, allowed 3 runs on 3 solo home runs, 2 of which came in the 7th inning. And so overall, like 7 innings, 3 runs, it's great. We'll take it. It's not mind blowing. You're not going to look at it and say, this guy's a game changer, especially when it's against the A's. But it was exactly what the Dodgers needed. And realistically, Lynn could have gone 8 innings. They didn't necessarily need him to with the day off, but I wouldn't have minded seeing him come back out for the 8th, but after giving up 2 home runs in the 7th, I get why they didn't. But we said when the Dodgers got Lynn, if he can give them 6 or 7 innings and allow 3 or 4 runs, the Dodgers are going to win most of those games. And the Dodgers only had to use Caleb Ferguson and Bruce Gratterall in this game, which means they have 6 rested relievers ready to pitch tomorrow if necessary. And, going forward, having a guy go 7 innings helps out everybody in the bullpen.
What we said from Lance Lynn was we needed length in the rotation, and 7 innings is length. The fact that he only gave up 3 runs is also a benefit. But also the fact that those 3 runs came on 3 solo home runs, when giving up home runs is his issue so far this season, is, something to still be cautious about as they move forward. But again, with the Dodger offense, as we expect it to be, putting up at least 5 runs a game, on average, if Lance Lynn can go 6 or 7 every time out, giving up 5 or less, the Dodgers are going to have a chance in all those games. And that's all we can really ask for to get through the season. Anything more than that, whether, Lance Lynn improves significantly or, the Dodgers, he did have a little bit of a change in his pitches, though, in terms of how he distributed them. He'd throw a lot more four-seam fastballs and a lot more curveballs. Which have his four-seam fastball. He was already throwing it a lot, but he threw it even more this time. Got a lot of swing and misses on it. He threw the curveball a lot more, which was actually one of his better pitches this season in terms of results. He just doesn't throw that often. Maybe those little changes can help here and there. But for your first start and for it to be against a bad team and for you to still pitch relatively well, that's exactly what the Dodgers needed. And, then his next start will be against the Padres. Obviously, that'll be a lot different in terms of the lineup he's facing. But again, they went a game where they only had to use 2 relievers. And because the offense put it away, they didn't have to use one of their main relievers, or at least Evan Phillips. In that last inning, they were able to use Gratterall. So,
yep. And besides Lance Lynn, Kike Hernandez made a big impact. He had a 3-run double with 2 outs in the 4th inning to put the Dodgers up 4-0, which was huge. And the other 4 runs were driven in by James Outman ×2, Mookie Betts, and Freddie Freeman. Those guys have been around a while and been contributing. Outman's 2 RBIs came on a bases loaded hit by pitch and a bases loaded walk. Mookie had a home run, and then Mookie had a double later, and Freddie had an RBI single, his 4th hit of the game to drive in Mookie. So this really was a game showing the contributions from, pretty much everybody. Ahmed Rosario hit the ball hard a couple times, didn't do much, but he did also shift over to shortstop later in the game after the Dodgers pinch hit for Miguel Rojas. And all in all, it was a great team win. You can say, it was just the A's. Well, the A's were the team on the schedule, so that's who the Dodgers played, and they scored more runs than them, and that's what we're looking for. And they get to face Hogan Harris today, so hopefully they can continue doing that. Second straight lefty that nobody's ever heard of, who has an ERA in the 6s, and the Dodgers did okay against the first one. Hopefully they can do even better against Hogan Harris. And we'll take it, right?
Yeah, like you said, you can only play who's on your schedule. And if you're going to play it's one of those where why have and feel any type of way about the Dodgers? Oh, it's just the A's. They won. If they had lost, you're not going to say, oh, it's just the A's, or you're going to be upset that they lost to the A's. So why not be happy when they beat the A's?
Yep.
Yeah, it makes sense. But yeah, again, good contributions all around. It was good to see Mookie get that ball and get it out of the park. Good to see Freddie back on track. Will Smith he struck out 4 times. He's been scuffling a little bit lately. I saw some people thinking, maybe they've had to use him too much, but we all think that they don't use him enough. So who knows what the issue is? But he goes through slumps and he'll find his way out of it.
Yeah, it would be nice if they had a reasonable backup catcher to give him a day or 2 off, and to try to snap out of it. We don't know. He was wearing a bigger elbow guard on that left elbow today. Don't know if the left elbow is still bothering him. It wasn't a typical Will Smith day. I said on Twitter, if I told you between Will Smith and Chris Taylor, one of them is going to strike out 4 times tonight, and the other one's going to walk 4 times tonight, I said it would take you 4 guesses to get it right, because you wouldn't believe me the first 2 times I told you were wrong. Chris Taylor walked 4 times. Will Smith struck out 4 times, but the Dodgers won. And as Lance Lids said about 6 times in his 3-minute scrum with the reporters after the game, we won the game, and that's all that matters. And, I like that approach. So I think that does it for us today, right?
Yeah. Just remember, if you want to be upset with what happened at the deadline, be upset. That's, we're not happy about it, but we're going to try to find the positives in it, because why focus on the negatives?
Yeah, I'm a positive guy, and I don't even have to lie to myself. The Dodgers still have a lot of really good players, and they did get better, and they were already in first place when it started. So I like their chances to get to the postseason, and then anything can happen, good or bad. So that'll do it for us for today. Thank you all. Thank you, our everydayers. Remember, the Dodgers take on the A's again tonight. You can catch that game on SiriusXM or the SXM app by searching for Dodgers. You can follow us on Instagram and on Twitter at Locked On Dodgers. Vince is on Twitter at VinceSense91. I'm on Twitter at Snidog, and the DMs are open in all of those places. Our email address is lockedondodgers@gmail.com, and our phone number for voicemails or text messages is 323-863-LOCK 5625. We are here every weekday morning, and we hope you'll be here with us. When you get in your car or sit on your couch, tell your smart device to play podcast Locked On Dodgers. And remember, you don't have to agree. You just have to listen. We'll talk to you tomorrow.
Have a good one.